would say about 20 years ago, about 10 years into being a chiropractor, I would see on occasion a patient would come in with what we would call a loss of their cervical curve. And I'll show you some pictures and I'll use some words later and describe some of that, what it's supposed to look like and what it doesn't look like anymore. But at this day and age, just 20 years later, I hardly ever see anybody come in with even close to a cervical curve the way it's supposed to be. In the last 20 years, something has happened in our society that is changing our postures dramatically for the worse. Anybody have any ideas what that might be?
Cell phones.
Cell phones, computers, tablets, technology, which is something we basically almost can't avoid anymore. It has poured into our culture in a very short period of time. And in that very short period of time, our physical body has not had a chance to adapt to the changes that have occurred in our society. And the way we're adapting is by sitting more than ever before, having poorer posture than we've ever had before. And the key to it starts with the neck. And so we're going to talk about the restoration of the cervical curve and why that's so important and why we're seeing some of the changes we're seeing and how people are getting sicker and sicker. To understand the importance of it, that the shape that is the strongest for load bearing is not a straight supported structure. It is a curved structure. The angles in an arch can support much more weight than something that's in a square or something that's in a straight line. And we can go back in time and see structures that are arched in shape that have supported and lasted the test of time. And we can see spans across great spaces. And what is holding up this bridge is not this straight line, but the curve that's very specifically designed in the cables that support it. The arch is what supports everything. So, in nature, as human beings, we have things like a jaw. Very powerful. It's an arch. We have things like the rib cage. Not as powerful because they're thin bones, but very thin bones would break very often if they weren't in this arched curve design to protect our heart and our lungs. The arch of the foot. You know, you step down off of something, thousands of pounds of pressure into your foot are being placed onto it during the day. Hundreds of pounds are being taken, the whole weight of your body into tiny little points under your foot. All of that's being supported by the arch. Plantar fasciitis, anybody heard of that? Is when that arch starts to drop and we lose that arch. In the cervical, thoracic, and lumbar spine, when we look at it from a side view, we see a curve in the cervical, a backward curve through the thoracic, and a forward curve again in the lumbar. So these are called a lordosis and a kyphosis, or kyphotic type curves. So those are the names of them. But the angles to which they are identical to the angles that we use to support these massive structures that we build, like a bridge. There's no coincidence that those curves are there to support our body and give us the best defense, so to speak, to fight against the all-powerful gravity that's always trying to get us a little bit closer to the ground all the time, yes? And the better these structures are, and the healthier their curve, and the healthier those alignments are, the better we have a chance to fight against it. Okay? We're designed that way. So the cervical curve, we're going to focus on that tonight. This is what a normal cervical curve should look like if a person was facing in that direction. It's healthy. You can see spaces in between the bones where the discs are. And this gives us both structural support and strength, but allows us to have a lot of movement. So the skull, for example, you grab a chair there. The skull is there to encase the brain. It is by far the most important organ we have. So it is the best protected. Nothing can function without the brain functioning. The spinal column has to take the messages from the brain and get it out to the rest of the cells of the body. And the rest of the cells of the body have to be able to get communication back to the brain. So we use the nervous system to do that. So the next best protected thing is the spinal cord. And then later, the next best protected thing is the heart and the lungs. They diminish by importance by how well protected they are within the body. Does that make sense? So, but what becomes critically important to our function as human beings is we have to have segments. And we have to have segments because we are designed to move. We are not designed to sit in a chair in front of a computer, on a cell phone, or on a tablet in this position for hours at a time. There's nothing about the way the human body was designed that says that that's good for us. And in fact, if you ever want to come to my Sitting is the New Smoking class that I started a few years ago, I have to tell you that the statistical data is actually telling us it's actually far worse than smoking ever was to the body. And the way the diseases and the way our bodies are changing by the moment we sit in a chair, what happens to every single cell. So if you can't get to that class, as I mentioned earlier, it will be on YouTube when we do it. So do watch it. The curve is there. We need to be able to move, right? We need to be able to see around this incredible design that we have as human beings. We need to be able to see around us, and it gives us movement, is what those joints do. One of the first things that we start to lose when we lose the cervical curve is the ability to turn as far in some of our rotation and extend our head back. We start to lose that movement. And so when we don't have movement, we can't get blood flow into the discs, and they can't get nutrients. They can't repair themselves throughout the course of the day. And they start to break down and deteriorate and degenerate very quickly. The nerves that come out of the neck feed all types of internal organs: thyroid, heart, lungs, just a few important things. Your sinuses, nerves to the muscles around your eyes, are all fed from different branches that come out of the neck. We have charts, and I know you can see there's posters up on the walls that tell you which muscle groups are being affected by the nerves that come out of the neck. Maybe you get a symptom like tingling into your hands or arms. Or maybe you get aching pain shooting down your arms and hands. Or maybe you have branches that go up into your head and it gives you headaches. Those types of things when those nerves start to get irritated. They come out of the spinal, and again I mentioned before, the spinal cord is very well protected inside. Now, the bones. We talk about a subluxation. If something's healthy, it's in a normal alignment. Most everybody knows what a dislocation is, when a bone completely separates. Or somebody said a dislocated shoulder, something like that. I think earlier today I was watching ESPN. One of the golfers in the Masters they have a par 3 the day before the Masters start, and the guy hit a shot and he got a hole-in-one, and he started jumping up and down and jumping up and down. He was all excited, and he rolled his ankle and completely dislocated his ankle. He was standing there and he actually shoved it and popped the bone back in. And I was like, so, and he's not playing today, by the way. I don't know what kind of chiropractor he probably has working on him, or therapist or whatever, but it's pretty amazing that he's actually even out on the course. So. But a subluxation means it's not quite dislocated, it's not completely separated, but it's out of its normal position. The longer things move out of that normal position, the discs and joints and things start to break down. and then the body will fuse it up, tighten it up, spasms around it, grow scar tissue around it, and then not let it move anymore. Once it stops moving, that degeneration and deterioration that I just earlier mentioned starts to go at a faster and faster and faster rate. This is called subluxation degeneration. This is a normal curve again, like I showed you earlier. This is what I see quite a bit now, and I tell you what, most of what I see are completely reversed curves. I don't even see straightened ones anymore as often as I see the reverse completely backwards curve. And I believe most of it is this position and this posture. So taking a beautiful curve with good posture looking straight ahead, and we do this in that position for hours and hours and hours a day. And I can tell you that I've probably seen each and every one of you on a cell phone in here at some point looking down. And I'll nudge Katie, my awesome tech CA, and say, go talk to them. Tell them to pick their chin up. So, and you've seen Katie, even Katie, when we started using the tablets, her head was down, she was having headaches all the time. So we got her the stand. So she has her stand right in front of her, so the pads, we have the pad, but it's right up, right at the height she needs to keep her head straight. She's doing much better now. So there's all kinds of stuff that's out there. Some of it's very inexpensive, but not everybody's using it. We're using more stand-up desks instead of sitting at laptops hunched over like this for hours trying to do our work. We're not designed for that. So the different phases of degeneration that we see, the first phase is when the bones are just out of their normal position. They're starting to function abnormally. We start to see some subtle changes on the x-rays. Maybe slightly decrease in disc height. When we see the second phase, we're starting to actually see bones start to grow little spurs and points, and all of a sudden they start to have jagged edges. And the healthy disc space starts to become compressed. We're losing fluid in the joint. It's starting to get smaller and smaller and smaller. It's compressing and degenerating, losing all the fluid inside, and the discs become very weak and unstable, and then it's very easy to get a herniated disc when the bones are in that position. Herniated discs we used to think were something that happened when you had a big bad injury, and we've learned through a lot of research that that's not true. The disc weakens and weakens and weakens and weakens from malfunction over a long period of time, where maybe you get a little stiffness or a little achiness, and then one day you go to pick up a stick in your backyard, or you turn and sneeze and you can't move. You have pain shooting down your leg if it's in your low back, or maybe down your arm or something like that if it's in your neck, once that disc herniates. And then eventually the bones will fuse together and become a solid piece of bone, if you're not having surgery where they go in and screws and plates and all kinds of titanium and things like that to start to fuse things together. From what I've seen, surgery really isn't the answer, because yes, it can give you some temporary relief from that problem, but now you've got a fused section of bone that can't move, and now the joints above and below become under a tremendous amount of stress trying to compensate for that fused segment, and very often within just a couple of years you're back having another surgery, because those other joints start to break down and deteriorate. So we do everything we can to try and avoid that. But it's becoming a more common problem because of our society and the way we sit. So how do we battle against this stuff? What can we do? One of the tools that we use is called a dinner roll. Dinner rolls come from a doctor, I believe in Australia, is one who invented it. And of course it sounds like dinner roll, doesn't it? So I believe his name was Denner, and he just put roll on the end of it. Okay? But we used to use a lot of contraptions and traction and weights and wedges and all this type, send people home with all this stuff, and you know, we used to hang, I don't know if you remember seeing anybody with the water bag hanging over the door with the brace pulling their head up like this. But what was happening is we were tractioning them straight and then right back into the same position it was in before. We weren't creating the curve. And what the dinner roll does is it actually creates a curve in your neck and still gives you that traction with just the weight of the head hanging off the back of it. And so each person has a different size neck, so we have different size dinner rolls. The problem with it is that if used without the chiropractic adjustment, you're taking a bone that's not moving, as I mentioned before, because the segment's locked, and you're taking a bone that's out of its normal position and putting it into that traction mode. Doesn't help. Probably makes more irritation, going to make things worse. If we do an adjustment and get motion back into the segments again, and get them moving again, and then we add the dinner roll, it becomes an incredibly effective tool to bring your curve back. So we've got some curves here. You see this is an example of a woman laying over the dinner roll. You can see the picture. This is what it looks like with her in a dinner roll and an x-ray. And then this is somebody who's just laying on their back. You see how flat the spine is? And then this is somebody with a dinner roll. You see the curve? They're laying flat, okay? This is an x-ray of somebody before they started the chiropractic and using the dinner roll. And this is after about 36 visits. This is somebody with a pretty healthy neck though, and it's restored that curve between the adjustments and using the dinner roll together. Those are healthy joints, and it took 34 visits to try and bring it back. The problem is if we're doing adjustments and you're going back and sitting on the computer the same way, and we're doing adjustments and you're going home and you're laying on the couch like this with your pad and your phone, then it's very difficult to try and get a curve that we spent a couple of minutes working on and you're spending hours undoing. And the dinner roll helps us with this. So you can do the things that you need to do, not that I am encouraging you to go home and do this on your phone for hours anyway, but there's things that you can change with your posture, but there's some things you can't get away from. Because if you have to work at a computer, you have to be at that computer. And I promise you, no matter how much you try and concentrate and think about it, by the end of the day, you're like this. The computer screen sucks you in. And there's some jobs that require that that's the only place the computer is, and that's how you have to work at the computer. Right? So the dinner roll helps us. It helps us do the adjustment, get things moving, and then you could do it for a couple of minutes when you get home at the end of the day, and it can make all the difference over the course of days and weeks and months, and then help hold that curve so you need less chiropractic adjustments as we go. Because your body is, you're doing this little bit of couple of minutes each night maintenance for yourself to undo what you did during the day. Does that make sense? So, there's stretches and exercises. When it comes to neck stretches, first of all, head down stretches are probably not the best for you because that's the position that's got you in the reverse curve to begin with. But very often people will do things like this to stretch their neck. Anybody ever see anybody do that? For most of us nowadays, that's wrong. So you want to keep a curve and then bend to the side to stretch it, or lean back and stretch it, to stretch out the muscles of the neck. Okay? Exercise, the single solitary, easiest exercise to do for the neck to help restore the curve is very simple. I'm going to let everybody do this with me. I'm going to have you put your fingers on your chin. Okay? Watch me. And then you're going to take your chin and you're just going to pull it back. You don't want to tuck, and you don't want it to raise, and that's why your fingers are there, okay? You want to come straight back and hold it for just a few seconds, and then let it go. Let it come back to a comfortable position, shake it out maybe a little bit, give yourself a couple of seconds, and then do it again. And that's going to help push that bone on the top back and help bring some of that curve back, strengthen some muscles and stretch the other ones that are getting tight and shortened from being in that position. A couple of simple stretches, a couple of simple exercises. And what we're going to do right now is we're going to take a couple of minutes and we're just going to show you how to set up on a dinner roll. And then we're going to answer any and all of your questions that you have this evening. Okay? Good? Excellent.
Thank you for watching our video. If you like what you saw, be sure to subscribe to our channel.
Yeah, and like us on Facebook. There's always a lot of information also on our website at rosemontchiropractic.com.